Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing a special video today. Basically just showing off my Final Fantasy collection. As you can see here, apparently a love of Japanese culture certainly runs in the family. My father is obsessed with Japanese culture. I kind of got a little bit on a Final Fantasy kick starting about 2012 or so when... don't get me wrong, most people have been telling me about the Final Fantasy games ever since they were coming out. But as a member of the PC master race at the time, I didn't have a PlayStation or any other way of playing these wonderful games, so I kind of had to put it on hold until much later. And, well, now I have my playable systems basically, and I figured, why not try to get these games while I can get pretty good deals on them? So I kind of wanted to show my collection. I'm kind of appraising them right now. This is also a video trying to show appraisings. Now these games have not been opened, which is why you're seeing them. I do have a couple of games that I have opened, which I might mention. But for anybody who's interested in getting these games appraised, or at the very least, if they have these games and they'd like to appraise them for themselves, I'm going to basically just provide you with some of the information that I have on a lot of this content. So stick around and I'll start showing you guys some of the stuff. This is Final Fantasy Origins Collection on the original PlayStation 1. Greatest hits versions. I don't care too much for whether or not a game is a greatest hits version, although if I can get a non-greatest hits version. The discs for greatest hits versions in some cases are better. They're usually patched. Sometimes they have extra content. Sometimes they're not. But if the factor of the greatest hits doesn't really bother me. And that goes for all the greatest hits that you might see here. I don't care whatsoever about the packaging. I just, want the game on disc, wrapped. And so this right here I could probably find on Amazon for about 10 bucks. They lowered the price on it recently, so I picked this up for about 10 bucks on Amazon. That's probably what it's appraised at. It has ports of the original NES or Famicom versions of Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2. Final Fantasy 2 never was released here in the United States, so this is probably the first time Final Fantasy 2 came to the United States officially, not including imports and fan translations and stuff like that. Over here, Final Fantasy Chronicles, I think I paid about $15 for it. I don't know what its value is right now exactly because I haven't looked recently. This includes Final Fantasy 4, which was released as Final Fantasy 2 in the United States. So it has come over here with a copy of Chrono Trigger. I have been told the ports on this, because it's the PlayStation 3, I'm sorry, it's for the PlayStation 1, there were slowdown and stuff like that. The Chrono Trigger port had it worse than the Final Fantasy 4 port did, but it's great games, just great games all around. Chrono Cross, this is probably appraised at about $20 US still. It is the sequel to Chrono Trigger that people waited 20 years to come out. It's only available on the PlayStation 1, although you could probably download it to your PS3 through the PS3's console. Probably, I would say, a value about $20. This right here has become the gem of my collection. I don't think I paid more than $20 for this, brand new from Amazon. Final Fantasy VIII, the game that put the Spoony one on the map for his hate of it. Most of my friends, this game has some serious loyalists to it. My friends love this game, really, because the game mechanics are kind of broken in a fun way, based upon how you can do things. So this game has some serious diehard loyalists. Value on this game currently is around $60 US. I am not joking. My value since I picked it up it's just shot through the roof. So kudos. Final Fantasy IX. This game also has a diehard following. Probably a more diehard following than Final Fantasy VIII does, because it harkens back to the original Final Fantasy game. I think it was the last Final Fantasy title that the original director of Final Fantasy directed. I think it's his favorite also. It was listed as the number 2 game for the PS1, of course the number 1 game being Metal Gear Solid, by the Bennett the Sage. I don't know if he's since reappraised that, but it has that honor. The game could probably be, I think I paid $15 for it, maybe even a bit less. It's probably at about $20 right now. Final Fantasy Anthology, this is also another recent addition to my collection. It includes Final Fantasy V, which was never released over here, and Final Fantasy VI, which is considered to be the best, one of the best Final Fantasy games. I paid 10 bucks for it. Kudos. I have been told If you can, get the original SNES version because controls and controllers and whatever, but that really doesn't bother me or affect me one way or another. That can be downloaded on the Wii. If you have a Wii or a Wii U, you can download it through the Wii's Virtual Console. So moving on, Dissidia 12. I don't have the original Dissidia. I don't know why not. It's probably the original Dissidia is probably like 12 bucks on Amazon right now. This I think I paid less, about 15 or so at Walmart. So kudos on that one. Final Fantasy 13 on the PlayStation 3. You could probably get this for about 20 bucks, maybe as low as 15 if you get the Greatest Hits version. I don't think it has more value than that. This is the PS3 version. It's also available on the Xbox 360. That's the version I've been playing. You won't see that version here, but I've actually been playing through the Xbox 360 version of Final Fantasy 13. This is the Xbox 360 version of Lightning Returns. This is just the regular version. I think I paid 15 bucks for it. Some stores might sell for as high as 30 right now. This is a recent release, but I paid about $15 for it on Best Buy last week. PS3 version of Final Fantasy Lightning Returns, or Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13. This was only available on the Square Enix store. It probably has a value of about $100. This version, the PS3 version, is sold out on the PlayStation store. I'm sorry, on the Square Enix store. I don't think you can get new copies on like Amazon or something like that. This thing is pretty rare actually, and I'm pretty proud of this one. Behind here is Bravely Default. And this is a good quality version of Bravely Default. There are versions of Bravely Default that have been destroyed. The reason why I'm including Bravely Default in the Chrono Trigger games here is because these games, even though they have been, they're not considered Final Fantasy games, they're separate. They are developed by Square Enix. And so it does have the Square Enix pedigree on it. But I guess it's because a lot of people have said that Bravely Default is almost like a spiritual successor to like Final Fantasy 3 and stuff like that. So it was a part of my collection. I was lucky enough to get a copy of it for $55 off of GameStop.com, and they actually shipped it to me no problem in a pretty decent box. From what I've been told, all the copies that were sold through Amazon.com were all destroyed or smashed or squished in some way because Amazon didn't ship them properly, but GameStop did. Right now, the value of a good copy of this is at least 150 bucks. So this thing nearly basically tripled in value. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. The value on this is going up quite a bit too. I think I paid $15 for this. I've been talking about this game quite a bit. They want a re-release, with HD graphics. This is in high demand. People really like this game. Final Fantasy 13-2 Collector's Edition. This was pretty common. This is my favorite version of the 13-2. This didn't include any DLC with it where you bought it from, but the Best Buy version actually had a physical manga, which is what's in the back of that right now. I finally got it appraised. I think I paid about $60 for it, which was much less than what they originally sold it at. I don't know if the value on this has shot up, but copies with the manga are sought after. Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X-2 original PS2 versions. I actually got this before they announced the PS3 and PS Vita versions, so I didn't know if these would be available. I think I paid maybe about $13 for Final Fantasy 13-2, maybe about $18 for Final Fantasy X. I'm sorry, for Final Fantasy X-2, and about $20, $18 for Final Fantasy X. Don't know if the value on these have shot up because obviously they have been re-released on subsequent platforms. Behind this is the PS3 exclusive version, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X-2 Collector's Edition. That was also only sold on the Square Enix store for about $90. That is, I believe, sold out. I don't think you can get that anymore. So on that, the value might have been shot up, but I don't see any resellers for it on Amazon. At least I haven't as of the time of this taping. So behind that is Final Fantasy IV. Now you're probably asking yourself, okay, so I have at least 2 copies of Final Fantasy IV here. Why did I pick up Final Fantasy IV again on the PSP? Well, Final Fantasy I, Final Fantasy II, and Final Fantasy IV are all playable natively on the Sony PSP. They actually did re-release those games. I've also been told Final Fantasy IV has been ported to the Nintendo DS, the original DS, along with Final Fantasy III, although those are separate orders. I would love to get my hands on a copy of Final Fantasy III on the DS, but unfortunately that hasn't happened yet. The reason why I picked this up is because this included the Final Fantasy IV, the After Years, with it. And at $15 on Amazon, I thought this was a pretty good deal, and I didn't have to pay extra for the After Years. From what I've been told, the After Years is usually sold separately or is a pretty expensive addition. Obviously, the After Years was not included with the Final Fantasy collection here, the Final Fantasy Chronicles here, so it was something that was done after the fact. You can get it if you buy the iOS version, but again, it's a pretty penny, and from what I've been told, people were told not to bother with it. I think this version is okay, though. Behind Final Fantasy X is another copy of Final Fantasy 13-2, value of about 20 bucks, I would say. That's the Xbox 360 version. Behind it, a more recent edition. I'm pretty proud of this one, too. This is Final Fantasy Type O HD, part of the Novella Crystallis series, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is the PS4 version. It does include the Final Fantasy 15 demo. Value of this collector's edition, because this was a beautiful collector's edition, it includes a manga, several other things basically. Value, and it also has what looks to be Mr. Amano's amazing artwork on the cover. Fortunately, I don't have much light here, but you can probably see the gold etching on the black background. It's just absolutely freaking beautiful. I want to move this because I'm worried that this stuff will topple over, but it's just absolutely beautiful cover. I believe value of this is at least $100. It might have shot up in price. I haven't looked. Dirge of Cerberus has absolutely no value whatsoever. I think I paid about $13 for it. That has not shot up in price whatsoever. Continuing with the games, this is Final Fantasy XII. There has been, in recent time, probably within the last year, a heavy demand to port this over to the PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4. Heavy demand for that. I don't know. I haven't played this game yet, so I don't know exactly how high the demand is, but I do know that this game is being sought after. I know there was a collector's edition for this game, which obviously I don't have. It's pretty expensive. This right here probably has a value of, I would say, about $20. But the collector's edition has a much higher value, probably around $70. I don't have a copy because the collector's editions were rare, but actually my friend does. I do have a friend that does actually have a copy of the collector's edition. Behind that, Final Fantasy X, X-2 for the PS4. This is the limited edition version. It has a value of about 50 bucks. Behind this is Yoshitaka Amano's The Sky compilation. It's sold for about $100. It's a compilation of all of his artwork, or most of his artwork, for Final Fantasy Final Fantasies 1 through Final Fantasy X in 3 volumes. It is amazing artwork. And it has a sticker price of $100 for this volume. I think I paid about $35 for it. I don't think that the value has gone up. But if you go to the store and see this, you can get it for at least a third of the price they're probably going to charge you for it on Amazon. So that is my Final Fantasy collection right there currently. As you can see, still no copy of Final Fantasy VII. I'm probably going to wait for, I'm probably going to have to get a digital release on that one. I did pick up, for at least digital releases, I did get copies of Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 4, and Final Fantasy 6 on the Wii Virtual Console. I'll probably play them on my Wii U using the Wii's emulator, or using the Wii U's Wii emulator. But there you have it, an incredible collection of games appraised as to the best of my abilities, basically. There are a few gaps. I really wish I could have gotten a copy of Final Fantasy VII back in the day. That would have been amazing to have. But that right now is at least $250 new. Good luck on that one. I have no idea why Square hasn't bothered to just reprint the damn ISO. They'd make a freaking killing on it. So until next time, guys, this is Final Fantasy stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed to look at this, at my little collection here. Until next time, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Over and out.